Hello. This will be part two. I had to go and check on my dinner that was on the stove. Still is, but I shall try to make this short. But anyway, I was talking about intake and why it's endothermic instead of exothermic. Okay, so intake is endothermic instead of exothermic because humanity exists in a continuum. And you'll see in one of these boxes that the word continuum is assigned because that's part of the process. We are in a continuum. Everyone, you, me, I, individual and individual, and additional and additional. We're all in a continuum. And anyway, so directions. Um, they have a point of departure into intake. And so we are all like, we all like, we all have one of these like phone ports, whatever they're really called in generally established society. We all have one of them. But anyway, okay, so following directions, you know, um, into intake, you know, we have then a point of departure from intake into fast, slow, um, which is the reason why I put this, I assigned fast slash slow into a box, is to um, is to sort of point out how you know speed is a factor. So think of all these boxes in this design of universal system model, so to speak. Think of all these boxes as a factor, in other words, a fact section. In other words, a perception section of the overall, systematizing, you know, mechanized system of, uh, you know, life, existence, whatever you want to call it. But anyways, okay, so a factor, our factor here is like fast versus slow, so it's basically speed, it's basically rate. Think of it, think of this factor as housing speed, housing rate. And from this factor, it has 2 points of departure. One is conditional, the other is external. We'll talk about the conditional later, but okay, following the external point of departure from fast slash slow, it comes into process, and then from process we get a conditional point of departure into connection, from which we get a conditional point of departure into reception, and from here, from reception, we have a point of departure that is internal. So, but we'll get into that a bit later. I want to talk about how fast and slow has a point of departure that's conditional into reception, and what that means with these two arrows that are circular. So these two round arrows. Okay, so basically you'll see in the bottom left of the system model design, there is there are two, there's a circle formed by two arrows of differing color, and in the top right, same thing going on, two arrows of differing color, but you'll notice how the arrows are colored, different. Like in the bottom left, there is a green colored arrow, and in the top right, there's a blue colored arrow. And so, but there's both in both the top right and the bottom left, there is a red circular arrow. And so, what these arrow circles are indicative of in this model is of continuums within the continuum, basically. So think of them as, you know, um, you know how there's the Russian doll, like you open one Russian doll, and there's another one, then you open that one, there's another one. Think of it like, within, the cosmic system, within the, that's what I'm calling it, right now, but like, the macro system. Within the macro system, there are micro systems. So, but within the main macro system is what I'm referring to in this video. There are subsumed, there are two subsumed primal systems. So, and they consist of two differing elements. And so in the top right, the blue circular arrow represents what the blue straight arrows represent, which is the internal, responding to metaphysics. So you think of this as the extreme of free will, and now in the bottom left you have the green arrow, and that arrow, that green circular arrow, it's colored green for the same reason that the straight arrows that are green are colored green, is because it's external. In other words, it's, basically it is indicative of external chaos, essentially, or external possibility, to the far reaches of external potentiality that you can envision. Like you can gain some sort of conditional awareness for a lot of what's external, but you can't gauge everything. Like, you can gauge the further reaches of the potential, but once, you can't go beyond a certain point. There are precipices to which you currently do not have the knowledge to bridge, and so, it's, I think that Nietzsche quote was kind of spot on when he said, if you, I forget it in its exactness, but something about staring into an abyss. Be careful, because it's escaping me at the moment, but you know the quote I'm talking about. Anyway, okay, so having explained partially what these two subsumed systems within the system, continuums within the cosmic continuum are, we'll move on from reception. So then we start to get into the point of main departure, into the responsive, the internal responsive to metaphysics, responsive from metaphysics, I should say. Okay, so from reception, there's a point of departure that is internal, responding to metaphysics, leading into composite. And so composite has a point of departure leading into optics. And so optics is, you'll see that the factor box that is assigned the term optics, the word optics, is red, and that's because basically our optics is where we, I made it red because our optics, is where we, draw our internal, our internal reality, our inner being, our free will, should we put it, from physics. It's through optics. It's primarily through optics, because optics collects composite, which collects reception, which collects connection and process, and rate / speed, the fast slow of continuity, and which is essentially the intake, and which is essentially it was birthed from the directions. But anyway, okay, you can sort of see this, if you're envisioning it, you can sort of see this coming together, this model of the universal system that I made. But anyway, okay, so from optics we have an internal point of departure from metaphysics, leading into another blue factor box, but this blue factor box has the word knowledge in it. Okay, and so why does a red factor, why does a physics factor have a point of departure leading into a metaphysics factor? So why is it that our optics lead into our knowledge? Okay, so optics lead into knowledge because this is basically, the remnants of registration, so to speak. Think of it like that, okay? Your knowledge factor is, it is the remnants of your registration. Like, everything needs to be registered. Like, all this, the optics, the composite, the reception, the connection, the process, the rate, the speed, basically the intake from, being in the point of the crossroads of directions, basically all of that needs to be registered into information, but then that what is the weeds that sort of don't make it into information, they become influence, and essentially they become the matter of ideation, which is knowledge. You break apart the word knowledge. What does it make? Know-ledge. In other words, knowledge is to be applied to, precipices, both from which we are standing at, looking out at, an unbridged, unknown, and also third party analyzing a mystery, that doesn't entirely connect, and we can only piece together event, and circumstance by process of ideating, creating bridges of metaphysics through utilization of the remnants of our registration of facts. Because optics, which accord to the internal drawing, responding to the physical, are, facts. They're what's objective, whereas knowledge isn't objective. It's subjective. It's responding to the metaphysical, which is that remnant ideational weedage of the registration of facts. And so knowledge is really knowledge is sort of like a more acceptable form of truth. Only it's not a form, it's like it's a fashion, it's influence as opposed to information. So it's like, whereas like over here in the factor box with reception in it, reception is actually truth, objectively speaking, right? That's what we can all glance at and be like, oh, that's true. When we all agree on truth, we're looking at reception. We're talking of truth as reception. But when you personally, are valuing something from a subjective, approach, then you're not looking at truth as though it is reception and objectivity anymore, but you're looking at truth, you know, framed through codec as though it is, you know, knowledge, basically, and it can have an overlay effect with some parts of reception, but other parts it's going to be very particular. It's going to be very special to yourself. But anyway, enough about the knowledge factor. Okay, now, so it's been my witness understanding, you know, that, you know, there's 3 steps to taking action. 1 is you get the facts, so you're utilizing the optics. 2 is you get the idea, which makes the plan, but the idea utilizes the knowledge. And then 3, there's correspondence, which means you actually have, you know how there's a word correlation, you know, it says, okay, there's a similarity between these 2 things, of, you know, from these different, you know, detached viewpoints or standpoints. There's a similarity, so they correlate. Well, correspond is that, you know, there is a similarity in the sense that, like, there's a similarity going on, but it's not through relation, but it's through respondents. So it's sort of like it's event motivated. It's not experience motivated. It's event motivated. And so in order for a catalyst of change to develop from your free will, from my free will, it has to be that there's a situation primed that is event motivating you to actually respond with it. That's when you get the change. You know, you don't get the wheels of motion altering things unless there is that event motivating factor at play. So that's why, you know, optics leads into knowledge, which leads into correspondence. And from correspondence, we have two points of departure into the factor called creation of law. And the reason why there are 2 points of departure that are conditional into the factor of the for the creation of law is that is basically, you know, think of it like a root of a, you know, there's the root, and then there are branches. Okay, so every action has more than one reaction in objectivity. That's just, you know, how can you not, you know, recognize that? You know, you see it all the time. Like if I were to like do a gesture, you know, Malcolm Xing it, or Ku Klux Klanning it, whatever. I'm not, you know, I'm not saying one or the other. That's not what this video is about. I'm just using those as examples because they popped in my head just then. And, you know, because I'm thinking of like a grandstander. Anyway, okay, let's say, you know, I'm Malcolm Xing it, or I'm Martin Luther Kinging it, or Jesus Christing it, and I'm up on a podium. Let's pretend for a second that I'm talking to a congregation of meerkats. Whatever I do, whatever action I take, you know, to the very affect of my expressions, to the very inflection and the force of my speaking voice, no matter what action I take, there's a congregation before me. And so while I'm Malcolm Xing it, it's not just one reactant looking at me to react after I'm done speaking and gesturing and shit and grandstanding. It's actually a sea of reactants. A congregation is a sea of reactants. In objectivity, there is no one reaction to every action, but there is a multiplicity dependent on the space, and the subjects therein. So, like, if I was just talking to myself and was in a sense deprivation room blocked off from everybody else entirely, and I started Malcolm X it, there would be very limited, reactants that would be relevant. There'd still be more than one reactant that would exist in in reaction to me, but it would be irrelevant because it's not what I'm trying to affect. If you're grandstanding in order to be actually legitimately, objectively by everyone's subject opinion seen through a sympathetic codec, to be grandstanding, you have to have more than one, object subject in the vicinity, in your proximity to be grandstanding, or else you're just talking to yourself, and any reactants present at that point are irrelevant because you're not looking for the right effect from grandstanding as it correlates with what people assume grandstanding to be from, collected viewpoints and collected, yeah. So anyway, okay, so I got into a bit of a digression on that. But, okay, so correspondence has 2 points of departure into creation of the law. And so creation of the law then has 1 point of departure that's conditional into negation of order. So this is what I'm talking about in the first part video, where I was saying how order is kind of like, a part in a machine. You take it out, you replace it with a new part, but there might come a time, a situation where you can't really get a new part to replace this part that you replaced the old part with that clunked out, so you need to actually get the old part and put it back in and to get the machine going again. So this is what I'm talking about. This creation of the law departs, there's a point of departure from creation of the law into negation of order. So if we think of creation in the sense of positing something, in other words, making something positive, and we think of negation as, the opposite of that. It's like you're, instead of creating, you're destroying, so you're making something negative. Okay, so every time you make positive a law, you make negative an order. You see this happening with the social justice warriors and the LGBTQ community. Like that, it makes sense that to call it a community when you're basically talking about minority factors that are not really based on location. It's not like every gay and lesbian and transsexual and bisexual person are all living on the same island. If they were all living on the same island, then it would make sense to call it a community, but they're not all living on the same island, are they? They're, scattered to and fro, and there are segments entirely disconnected from other segments, so it's not really a community that people just, like, they're not thinking calling it a community. It is a number of statistical individuating factors. In other words, fact sectors. That's what it is, but that doesn't have the same, buzz to it, ring to it, whatever. Anyway, it doesn't have the same ringtone. But anyway, okay, so coming back to creation of law, there's a point of departure from that to negation of order, and then there's an external point of departure from negation of order into causation. And so to speak about this. This is where, you know, we are now beyond our furthest reach of the tangible potential, and now we've entered into the abstract here. Okay, this is not tangible here. What we're discussing now with negation of order leading towards causation, we've entered into the abstract. We've entered into abstracto. And so abracadabra, alakazam, presto, changeo, don't be a stranger. Let's try to put our thinking caps on and see things, because our thinking caps have those goggles attached, with the crazy eyes with springs. So let's put our thinking caps on and realize that we have to actually now see things completely abstract to grasp this design of universal model of system, right? So the external is created. Now, what is the external in its essential being? Because we can't talk about the external from point of origin as if it's physical, because it's detached. That's what's like. It's the thing coming at you. It's not the thing coming from you. The external is the thing coming at you. It's the thing that makes you the target. It's not your target. It's the thing that makes you the target. And so, I'm not saying that certain external things can't be your target, but external things are your target, given certain, contextual devices that you employ. And anyway, enough about that. But generally speaking, the external makes you a target. You don't make the external a target. And so anyway, negation of order leads into causation through the external. So like I was talking about with the factor box that has the word knowledge in it, and how I was talking about how knowledge is basically the remnant perception, should we say, of facts. So basically, it's the weeds from facts. That's basically what knowledge is. It's because facts, are immediately respondent, to conditions, to the composite of what's coming at you. And so knowledge is it's not immediately respondent. It's it's the remnants of facts that you did something with, and now you've done something with those facts, you've done something with those optics, and so now you've got an imprint of what you did, and that's what knowledge is. Well, in a similar way, when you negate order, there is a more macro, remnant production happening. So with the creation of a law, there's the negation of an order. So you've made the order negative, the old order, which is really, an order that doesn't just go away. It's sort of, it becomes disordered, So here's the thing. This is the thing, about order, is that there's a reason why you have the word disorder as well as the word order. Order doesn't just go away. There are still people who, assign the label of Ku Klux Klan, to their being. There are still people who, kill people over, singing Frank Sinatra songs, My Way in particular. There's, there are still people who do that. And that's well after the fact of the first series of people who labeled themselves that way or did things like that because of reasons like that. Basically there is there's a creation, well, not a creation, like a production. Like here we have to distinguish between production and creation. Production is made by something that already exists. In other words, it's made by a process that didn't just come out of nowhere. Whereas creation is made by something that is original. Like that's the difference, right? Production is that which comes about from familiarity, in a sense, or just like that comes about from existence. Whereas creation is that which comes about from originality, which is that which comes about by a sort of spiral of all these factors into a sort of convergent process that like sort of takes like a compositio, a recipe for something, right? That like a recipe can always be original. That's something to keep in mind. A recipe can always be original, but ingredients can't. Make sense. Like a recipe, you can always utilize the same ingredients in very different ways. You can always, it's like, who knows if there's a limit to that. But with ingredients, like, well, if you're just going to have an orange, and it's from this particular, orange tree in your backyard or whatever, then, that's, you're consuming a product. Even though it's a natural product, you're consuming a product. It's not the same as, you cut up an orange, then you cut up a mango, and then you get a steak, and then you chop up the steak, and you make something disastrous, which I predict for the taste buds, but then you put that in your mouth, like that will be new. Even though it'll be disgusting, it'll be new. Anyway, I'm gonna make a third part to this because I got to check on the stove.